Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In today's episode, we are discussing the sixth episode of the TV series Task, an episode called Out Beyond Ideas of Wrongdoing and Right, There is a River. That's right, Sona. That's the title of the episode.
Possibly the longest episode title ever.
It might be, definitely for this show, that's for certain. My name is Victor, and I'm your host, and we go week to week covering shows here. Usually, I don't know what I was going to say there, but
You had so much energy behind that usually.
I thought I had something to say, but I didn't.
Story of my life.
With these episodes of Task specifically, but most of our recaps here, I'm joined by my co-host, Sona.
Hi.
Today's episode, this is all we're going to talk about. We're just going to talk about this episode of Task, which has been very eventful, to say the least. And I think audiences will be very satisfied with this episode. Before we get into any kind of breakdown, Sona, what did you think of this episode?
Well, a lot happened.
It certainly did.
No, I really enjoyed the episode. There were certain things about it that were, I think, objectively good, just not up my alley. And we can talk about that when we get there. But all in all, solid, good plot development. Everything is moving forward. I like it.
Good. This was, by the way, directed once again, about half of the episodes this season, directed by Sally Richardson Whitfield, who was an actress and now a TV director, who appears in this very episode, by the way, as the prosecutor that meets with Mark Ruffalo late in the episode, where they kind of negotiate what should they do with Maeve, what should Maeve's outcome be. But we'll get around to that as we break down the episode. I actually wanted to start with the title. We haven't broken down titles we sometimes do, but it hasn't been that relevant. We talked about some of the titles here in this show actually as well. But I do think it is very important. And I just read this poem, by the way, right before we had this conversation, and it made me think a little bit about maybe thematically what this whole show might be about. It kind of recentered things for me on this show and made me appreciate it a little more, to be honest. So I want to bring it up.
Was the poem The Road Not Taken?
No, it's actually called Out Beyond Ideas of Wrongdoing and Right.
Oh, like literally, it's a poem. I'm learning as we go. I did not know that.
There is a field. It's actually called. It's just either a different interpretation or it's just because of the water symbolism. I honestly don't know. I've also seen this interpreted as there is a desert, right, rather than a field. But the most people translate it as there is a field. But importantly, so this is from a poet. Didn't know this, by the way, until a few minutes ago. This is from a poet called Rumi, who is a Sufi.
Very famous poet.
Yes.
Very popular.
A Sufi poet from the 13th century. And very importantly, that there is in the most popular interpretation of this, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. So importantly,
a bit like Nightmare on Elm Street, but I don't think that's what
probably not the
century
case.
Persian poet was going for.
I think what they're talking about there, and I mean in general with his poetry, that there is this idea of these two worlds meeting, the spiritual world and the physical world. And once again, something I really didn't know about very much about this poet at all, though very famous, like you mentioned. But this idea of a spiritual being trapped in a physical form rather than the other way around, right? Oftentimes we think about and this is once again, I think thematically in the show, this idea that we are physical beings yearning for the spiritual life, as opposed to this particular interpretation where we're talking about reincarnation, literally going back and forth through that doorway. But we are spiritual beings trapped in these physical forms. And I did make me think about, we touched on it earlier this season, about the idea that these people are trapped in their circumstance. So it's not only like a cultural being trapped, it's almost like truly like a spiritual being trapped here. And I think that is what the show is trying to represent. And maybe that's a little too highfalutin or whatever, but it did make me appreciate the show a little bit more. Obviously, we've been talking about spiritual yearning here, but we once again have these people who maybe have this. They're not only like that, they think they're better people. Maybe truly they are better people, simply trapped in these circumstances. And everybody, right? We've already touched on this in previous episodes when we've discussed it. But like Maeve is obviously trapped, and Robbie was trapped by his circumstance to some extent. And even just by this plan of getting revenge as well. And of course, we have Tom being trapped by his circumstance and what happened to his family. And even you can think about like even Ethan, for example, who did this terrible thing, but maybe was trapped by his biology or by his, the circumstances of being trapped at home during the COVID outbreak. So all of these things are like people in distress, trapped by their circumstances, but pining for some kind of redemption. Oh, and of course we have Grasso, right? Of course, who's trapped by his decisions as well. And I'm pretty sure we're going to find out more about his backstory. But I do think that it's interesting to bring up this title and obviously trying to explore some of this, which is already in the text of the show, of course.
Yeah, as we were talking about it, I was remembering the conversation between Tom and Grasso about
Right.
forgiveness.
Right.
The poem very much, the way you were describing it, very much made me think about that conversation and what forgiveness can and can't do, and how Tom's perspective is that forgiveness is for humans, not for God.
Exactly. Yeah, which I thought was very interesting. And I think that is kind of circling back to maybe the meaning of the poem as well, or this philosophy that Rumi is espousing in general. The idea that, like, yeah, it's not about knowing the mind of God. It's like this is about giving comfort to yourself. You have to forgive yourself, which is really what you need to do. And that's something that I guess we'll circle to it or get back to it when we get to the end of the episode. But that is something that maybe Grasso can't do at this point.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, it shouldn't come easily given what's happened.
Certainly not. I think I agree with that. So the episode kicks off with this, the convergence, this cliffhanger we saw in the previous episode, I should say, and that basically all the main players have all converged on this spot. Maybe this is one of the things you're going to be critical of right off the bat. I actually thought, as tense as this should be, I put quotes around that, I didn't really think this was as thrilling as it's been in the past. And I just thought some of the action was a little bit flat. I don't know if that was intentional, by the way, because of course we have more show to go. So I don't know if you want to have like a huge climax here and then kind of a letdown after that. But for me, this was a little flat given all the buildup.
That's interesting that that's your view, because for me, I thought I was bringing my own personal preferences into this, and I'm sure I was, which is, I'm not really an action movie type of person. And I often find myself in the action movie when they've built to like that huge, impressive, expensive sequence that they do inevitably in every action movie. I don't have the attention span to get through it. I always feel like it's too long. I know in the end, largely, who's going to survive and who won't. Here, at least, I had that mystery, right? I wasn't entirely sure. But it's just too much for me. And that is what I felt was going on here in the first, I don't know how long this chase in the woods goes on, but it was too long for my preferences. I had a hard time paying attention to it and understanding, processing where everyone was in relation to each other and what was happening. And I also didn't love, and they made this kind of artistic choice to like mirror things that were going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, for whatever reason, didn't really work for me. I felt like it was a little too on the nose, even though there's a mirroring at the end of the episode that I thought worked really well.
Yeah, there's a lot of that actually, and I think it's probably in Inglesby's writing more than it is in the direction choices, but I could be wrong about that. But it does seem to be a motif with him that he definitely has a lot of these not only parallel scenes, he has parallel characters and going through parallel circumstances. And there's some interesting things to say about that as we go on. Just like, for example, when we see Tom going to visit a child who's in care, and I actually thought we were seeing one thing and then we see something else, right? So you just see how the characters are paralleling each other across the way. It's to the point that you're even not certain, what we're seeing on screen. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. But yeah, I agree. I thought that the action was a little bit rote. It was a little. There was a lot of this, cutting back and forth with people doing the exact same action, which was a little on the nose, like you mentioned. And yeah, I mean, considering the tragedy of some of this, it didn't hit as hard. And maybe if it was more focused on just those stakes a little more clearly, it would have hit a little harder. But yeah, I think they were just showing what everybody was doing at all the times. And they really should have cut to just one or two main action beats. I mean, that's my preference as well. I thought the episode was very good, by the way. I want to be clear
Agree.
about that. I did like almost everything else in the episode. I thought that, especially given the cliffhanger last week, this was all a little unimpressive, to be honest.
I liked seeing Martha Plimpton out in the
Mhm.
woods. I wasn't
Yes, yes.
expecting that. I think
Yeah,
that's
she
a
gets shot.
different.
She's not really. That's
She
not really
does.
what she's been doing recently.
I know. I thought, like, wasn't she about to retire like in 6 months or something?
Exactly.
She's really going to do this. But so I liked that about it. I liked seeing Aaliyah being the
Oh
sharpshooter that
yes, of course, the sharpshooter, right?
that was nice. I think those were my pluses.
Main takeaways. Yeah, I thought that the whole, I mean, I really, I've been saying this over and over again that I can't really place, is Lizzie headed for some kind of redemption arc? And as the season progressed and she really didn't improve at being, a good detective, I'm like, oh no, she's just a sacrificial lamb. And indeed she was the sacrificial lamb. So I was a
But
little unhappy with that payoff, to be honest.
she did act
She
a
did
lot
shoot
more
that guy, right? Yeah.
confidently,
Yep.
right? She grew to have that confidence that
True.
she needed
True. Yeah.
to execute some key things.
Yes. And execute a person, not a key person though.
Yes.
One of the randos that gets shot at.
As well as using the radio to basically say, I don't know where we are
I don't know
exactly,
where we
but you
are,
need to come here.
and I can't hear anything you're saying. Just send everybody. That's basically it. I'm not sure what she was getting out of the trunk. Did you get was that like an EMT pack just for
Oh, I
first
wasn't
aid?
thinking about it. I don't know.
It's like a red bag, so I think it
Mhm.
was probably like a emergency kit. But yeah, she gets run down.
Because she can't hear the car
She
coming.
can't hear the car coming. I know it shouldn't be funny, but it is a little funny.
It should not be funny.
But then I also think, like, when they're yelling at her, Lizzie, Lizzie, I was also didn't understand the strategy of that, because I'm like, if she pops her head out, you're just gonna get her killed. So I'm not sure that's the best strategy. Oh, and maybe this is what you were talking about. And especially we have, of course, a much more effective for me was the fact that I think we're supposed to imply this, that even though Tom and Robbie haven't spent that much time together, they are kind of spiritual mates here, and they see something in each other, because we've seen Mark Ruffalo,
Yeah.
Tom is has some kind of need or want to help Robbie out of this situation. Robbie literally rescues Tom from his circumstance, and then they try to pay each other back later on. But it is interesting to see this kind of affinity for each other that they found here.
Yeah.
And of course, there's something very touching about him dying in his arms in the back of that car,
Yes.
which of course is again intercut, like you mentioned, paralleled to Lizzie and Grasso.
Mhm.
And I have to say, I know they're trying to make this correlation. And and it's interesting because, of course, Tom and Mark have spent very little time together, and that's a very powerful moment, because Robbie's just alone in that moment and wanting to make confession basically with this former priest. And there's something resonant there, as opposed to, like, Grasso, of course, has gotten Lizzie killed, but it's kind of hard to believe he has this affinity for her. He's only known her for a few days. But I don't know. I'm like splitting hairs here, because it's not like Tom and Robbie have spent a lot of time together either.
True. And they've both been in, all four of them. The two couples have been in very stressful situations together that do kind of bond you very quickly.
Yeah, true. But maybe part of what's happening to Grasso is just that it's not only specifically what's happened to Lizzie and how he took her as a pet project in some ways and really had some affinity for her. He's having a lot of moral doubt about some of the decisions he's made up until this point. So I think a lot of it is just a culmination point of probably him already on the edge here. And then this goes really, really badly, of course.
Well, I think both Grasso and Robbie have set things into motion that are having very, very awful consequences, and they're trying to grapple with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So another thing that happens when Robbie and Tom shows up, Robbie basically yells at him and tells him, "You're messing this all up for me." So he had a plan. And we did kind of speculate on this last week that, he shows up and he gives the drug, or seems to have the drugs when he goes to Freddie. So then why would he need the secondary meat? It turns out, it seems to be, we're still implying here, that he did indeed sell the drugs to Freddie. And then he pretends to discard the drugs in front of Jason. I assume he assumed he was going to die out there. Was that the indication? And then he's going to fake losing the drugs so that the money could end up to, potentially help his family. So I guess this is his grand scheme or something along those lines, right?
I don't know where the drugs ended up, but he took, what was the guy's name? Roy, the referee.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. He took his girlfriend, wife up on the offer to put together the deal because she said, "Oh, the guy that he was going to hook you up with never would have trusted him, but he'll trust me." Right. That was in the prior episode. Maybe they still end up with Freddie at the end. It wasn't entirely clear to me. But I think most immediately he gave the drugs to that blonde lady, wife, girlfriend, whatever.
Right.
And I guess he was going to use the duffel as like a distraction technique to somehow break free of the whole situation by thinking that the drugs were going to be more important to recover than killing him, I guess.
Right. I think that, I think the drugs would be more important in that particular case.
Like that's objectively true. Yes.
I think like the rest of the gang really doesn't care about that. Yeah. If he's lost the drugs, it's on his watch basically. So that I think that is part of the reason that, it seems to be the plan is still in effect to kill Jason off. So that is, probably going to be the case, especially if he doesn't turn up with the drugs, right? So that's a way to get rid of Jason. Yeah. So I was thinking that, maybe this is my version of it. I thought that maybe he went to Freddie, and Sally may have been the broker for sure, because obviously she's there at the end, but he went to Freddie and cut a deal to say, "I'll give you the drugs. And then of course you can call up Jason and say, he's been here. So everything's on the up and up as far as they're concerned. However, I can actually hurt Jason," which of course is also a goal of Freddie's. So they're kind of in cahoots on that. So I assumed that was kind of where the plan was. And then that obviously when he throws the bag of drugs into the water, that was that performative aspect of it needed to be seen by somebody, right? Like Jason had to think the drugs were out there.
Yeah.
So that he would but then what's the plan there? Like he doesn't find the drugs. He assumes they're in the wind. Or they do find it, and by then it's too late, and the axe is going to fall on him. I'm not sure exactly what the plan is. It's interesting how the very episode ends, because we have this moment where we see Robbie in the water again, and it's like he's victorious. He's like his plan has worked out. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, unless his plan was to kill Jason, as well, that isn't Jason just going to show up he's going to think, where would these drugs be if they're not here? They're at his house. Let me go check out his house, which of course puts all those people in danger, which I think was his plan to avoid that. So I don't know how smart this plan was.
I'm worried about that too. I think Robbie has been shown to not be good at thinking a few steps ahead. And I'm very, very worried for Maeve, and I hope she takes that money and gets the heck out of Pennsylvania.
Go to Canada, ASAP.
Yeah. She should go to an island in Canada.
That's right. Yeah, so it's a little weird. I thought that was another weird thing. Like in the moment, it felt very satisfying that it's like, Robbie's back from the dead for just a brief second, and like his plan has worked. And I'm like, does it? I'm not sure this plan's going to work, by the way. I'm not sure how victorious that final beat on the episode really should feel. It also seems a little weird. I guess Jason's the rash one here, so we have to believe that because we have seen him be rash before. For him to start shooting, Perry tells him in the moment, like, we need to get out of here, right? Like, the cops are here, right? So what, I mean, what is Jason's plan? To kill Robbie and what? Like kill the cops all too? Like you don't know how many cops are there. It could be like 50 of them there. And then what, get the drugs somehow and then escape? No one's gonna like have roadblocks up or whatever. Like I don't understand his plan either. To just start shooting at cops. Like that's only making the situation worse. I'm sorry. Especially when they don't know you're there.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he's too hung up on recovering these, not too hung up on recovering these drugs. I understand why he wants to recover the drugs. I think that is his singular focus right now, with the secondary focus being where the hell is my wife?
Right. He's obsessed with that too, of course, which is that's the other thing that's interesting about, and maybe that's why this early section felt a little drawn out for me. I was like Perry and Jason. This is my like plot thinking mind, which sometimes gets in the way of appreciating things in the moment, unfortunately. But like I'm like Perry, I watched this with my wife and we had this conversation as the scene was playing out because we thought it was going on a little too long. And I'm like, Perry and Jason, they neither one of them can die because there has to be a confrontation between the two of them that you know, Perry still has to have that scene where he needs to have that father son dynamic of like, you disappointed me or something. And then there has to be some reckoning for the fact that, like, why did Perry kill Aaron in the first place if there's not going to be some reckoning for that later on? So they were basically not going to die in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, Robbie could have killed Jason out in the woods when he was
Right.
strangling him.
Exactly. And that whole entire time, I just didn't buy it because of the fact that I just thought that there was too much plot that still needed to occur to resolve those characters. So, yeah, so some of it didn't work just because I kind of was thinking ahead in the plot, and which is it's my problem.
I mean, I did buy that Robbie didn't kill Jason because I think we have seen that as many lives have been lost that Robbie is primarily responsible. He's not
Yes.
a killer himself.
Right. Right. And he got that blade into him, that like sneak attack blade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And if he just gotten somewhere else, I mean, he knew where to stab him, because if he just gotten them somewhere else, it probably would not have been
Right.
a problem. What did you think of the rest of the team, like the team development there? Like we see, of course, Martha Plimpton's character, like you mentioned, she she gets shot right away. But I mean, I think that's probably in her character. She wants to be the leader, but of course, it's probably not been in the field quite some time. Ali, of course, pulls off the fact that she's, you know, cool and calm and accurate with all her shots, because of course that's what she's good at.
You
And who else?
know,
Yeah, go ahead.
I enjoyed that group. I enjoyed the task force. I like those characters together. But I think, and again, I think this is a personal flaw that I have. I was too preoccupied with like, wait, now where are these people
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
perspective to these people? How
Yeah.
far are they away from each other? The main road doesn't seem that far away. People seem to get there pretty fast. Maybe
Right.
they're just a few feet into the woods. Like, this is what my mind does during these types of scenes.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't even think about the logistics of it, but maybe that's part of the frustration as well. But you're absolutely right that there's this moment where we see we see that Perry and Jason are on the bridge behind Robbie and have a shot at him across the river, and then they escape back to the car. But then it seems like the other guys are on the other side of the river, which, I mean, they might have split up, so that makes sense. But then they're going back to their car, and like, where were they parked? They were parked next to the police cars. Like it all
Yeah,
seems
right.
like
See, this is
logistically,
where,
how did that all make sense, right? Like so, and then
yeah,
they're going over the bridge at the, well, I guess they were on the other side of the bridge. So I guess that makes sense, because now I'm thinking about when Lizzie gets hit, but it does kind of make sense because they were on the opposite side of the river, right? So it's the fact that they're coming across from the other side. So I guess it does make sense. Maybe half the team went on one side of the river, other half on the other side. Anyway, we're
yeah,
getting
I
caught
don't
up on
think
the
this is a
logistics.
sloppy show. I think it does all make sense, but I think
Yes,
I am not able to, I'm not
but
able to 100% trust it. So then I start questioning it and then I get distracted.
well, I mean, that's also, I think, part of the trickiness of this part of the episode, you know, because giving too much detail. I think that you're right. I think that they've actually thought about where's everybody situated, etc.
Yeah.
But by making us think about it, it's just distracting from what is more important in the moment.
Right. And
Obviously.
it was probably supposed to be like that chaotic feel,
Right,
right?
right.
That that you don't really know where you are and you are losing perspective. I mean, that probably was somewhat what they were going for, but I guess I wasn't able to go along for the ride on that as much as I needed to.
But then we finally get to the moment. We of course knew someone was going to die, and they end up killing off Robbie. Like, of all the people who need to die off here. I mean, they could have gone with killing off Tom, you can imagine, and the family has to deal with the fallout of that. And Robbie feels guilt about that. There's different ways they could have gone with the story, but they end up killing off Robbie. Do you think it's a mistake to kill Robbie off? I mean, there's only one more episode, so it's not like we have 5 more episodes without him. But do you think that they kind of lose a central figure here so late to the end, so close to the end?
I don't know. I feel like Robbie's done so much damage keeping him around, like his body count's just going to go even higher.
I actually had suspected, speaking of mirroring, I had predicted that the end of the season would be that Robbie would accept the fact that, when Tom gave him that option last week, like, you still can put things right, that he would accept the fact that, okay, maybe I end up in jail, but I'm still present for my family. And I pictured like Maeve visiting Robbie in prison. And in parallel, we finally see Tom go and visit Ethan in prison, right? So I'm like, there's some mirroring that could have happened, right?
Yeah.
But so I thought maybe we'll see that and they won't kill off Robbie. The other option is, of course, that Robbie dies. And indeed, Robbie died. But what did you think about the fact that, if you're going to see these two different characters, you have Robbie, who has kind of naively fantasized of how things are going to play out and has caused all this catastrophe. And even now, still thinking that his plan's going to work and when maybe it won't, right? And he dies, of course. But then also we have Lizzie's character, who also is kind of like naively not aware of really her circumstances either, right? It's obviously a very, very different context. But what do you think about those particular characters are the ones who end up dying off here in this? In other words, if you're cynical, like if you're Grasso, or if you're practical or pragmatic, like Tom has become, then you survive. The more naive characters seem to die. So is there something that show is saying there, or what do you think?
I feel like I like your alternate ending for Robbie, but I also kind of felt like he was going to have to die for this to be somewhat realistic. I think it's much more realistic that his character would not survive all of this than that he would decide to repent and go to jail. As far as Lizzie, I don't know what to think. She was a bit of a sacrificial lamb, no?
Yes, I feel it. Yeah, I feel she's a little one note for. Although I liked her character very much, by the way, I liked all these characters, to be honest.
I agree.
But yeah, I kind of felt like the whole time she was just being set up as the the eventual victim here. And as far as I like my ending too, by the way, with Robbie and Tom in their parallel journeys, one on on different sides of the incarceration wall. I liked that as a parallel ending, but I do think, just being like pragmatic, people watching a show, investing their time, one of the main characters probably had to die. So, I mean, that's so that's probably who it is. Unless they kill off Tom too. I can't imagine that happening next week, but I mean, it could happen by accident.
Still one episode left. Well,
there's only one episode. I will know soon enough. Okay. This is probably the first third of the episode, by the way, that section, because it's a pretty long episode, about an hour long. And I think that's probably like 20 minutes or so of what happens there in the forest. Of course, we have, we can just mention it a few more times here, but you brought it up last week, this incessant or, perpetual, or incessant maybe sounds worse than it is, water imagery, right? This idea of the river births you, baptizes you, kills you, drowns you, right? So there's like
always with the water.
always with the water. I mean, they even changed the poem to include a river. And immediately after this incident where a police officer dies, of course, there is an investigation, but they take their weapons. They basically put them all on leave. And then we find out that Martha Plimpton, I can't remember her name now, so I'm just going to call her Martha Plimpton.
I'm with you. Kathleen, I think.
Yes. When she called up and says, I think we have a problem, it turned out she opened an investigation. She tells Tom, eventually, when he confronts her about what's going on, this is not a regular investigation, that she's like, well, when you came to me, I opened an investigation. And it turned out that Grasso had already been accused of leaking information to the Black Hearts, no less.
Feels like this was a real failure of screening on the task force part.
Yes. I mean, wouldn't you be like, let's do some basic vetting of these
Right, like the
people.
one thing that would be at the top of the list for someone who should not be assigned to this project.
Any connection to the Dark Hearts at all? Wait a
Yeah.
second. I think that these guys are, I think he's in cahoots with them. Let's
Yeah.
put him on the task force. Unless that was intentional. Like, if you say we put him on the task force and like things blew up in our faces, but we were actually sussing out whether he was in on this or not, then I would kind of buy that, even though, it would be bad policing that they allowed this to happen, but it would still make a little more sense. But the idea that we didn't vet this guy at all, even though he's apparently had connections to this gang specifically in the past, I'm like, come on, that's a really bad. Who vetted this team at all? I guess nobody.
Apparently not. Yeah.
Right. Her name is Kathleen, by the way. And I did say Black Hearts before. I keep saying that. It's the Dark Hearts.
You just love Joan Jett so
I
much.
love Joan Jett. I do. I love rock and roll and Joan Jett. I mean, they have a convenient explanation here, by the way, that, well, because the charge was dismissed, that it wasn't on his record, but then, a deeper dive discovered this. But like I said, come on.
Didn't seem like they did that deep a dive to
Yes, exactly. You wouldn't just be like, like even when you just talk to, I mean, I guess I was going to say, maybe you can talk to the chief, and then the chief would be like, well, this did happen in the past. But then again, it looks like the chief is in on this. So maybe he put him there on purpose, right? So maybe all of this is part of the cover up. So maybe it's not as big of a plot hole as it seems to be. I could be wrong about that. Maybe they covered up his record so that he ended up on the task force because they wanted him to be a leak, right? So
maybe.
I'll give it a pass if that's the case. I'm just checking my notes here. So this comes later in the episode, but let's talk about it now. The whole confrontation between Tom and Grasso. I thought these scenes between the two of them were really good.
I agree with you, but I also question why Tom wouldn't just stay in his lane. He was asked to stay out of it.
Right.
Like, it just seems like maybe this could have some sort of repercussion that is going to interfere with the investigation, but maybe not.
I mean, yeah, I actually have questions as to whether Grasso is going to come undone here and might even, maybe go after the Dark Hearts. I mean, maybe we can speculate on what we think might happen in the end. I mean, he could just, if he wanted to take down the Dark Hearts at this point, he can probably just turn himself in and like start talking. So I don't know if there has to be some kind of like blaze of glory ending or not, but it is interesting, this idea of him, the whole conflict, we already touched on it, but the whole idea of what the purpose of confession is. And Tom finally admitting that, my son's been in jail and I haven't met him. I haven't visited him at all.
Yeah.
And that almost
14
gets
months.
Grasso to talk.
Yeah. I like these types of conversations, and you see this in other shows and movies as well, where there are things that are unsaid, but everyone is kind of accepting that is the truth, even though no one's saying it out loud,
Yeah. And going back to your point of, first of all, yes, it's better to have people say these things out loud. It's more dramatic than just keeping it internal, for sure. But also going back to the idea of like, maybe Tom should keep his mouth shut and let the investigation play out. I do think that, and maybe he's wrong about this, but going back to his background as a priest, and also he has had multiple conversations with Grasso about his Christian belief,
yeah,
and his Catholic beliefs, and that he's yearning spiritually as well. So I think that Tom is there, like he's done multiple times in the show. He's being kind and open-hearted, but he's also manipulating as well, right? He's trying to use the affinity he had with Robbie, for example, to get Robbie to do what he wanted him to do. Obviously, in that circumstance, he was afraid he might get shot. But in this particular case, he thinks that he can reach out to him. So it's both a manipulation potentially, and Grasso even calls him out on it, going like, "Oh, you're good, you almost got me." But I think it's more than that. He's like, he does think that I can talk to him and I can get through to him, because he knows that he's also spiritually longing, like every character on the show practically.
Yeah.
Who do you think was the MVP performance wise in this episode? I think there's a lot of possible candidates, but did you think this scene was? I mean, I thought the death scene with Robbie was really touching. And even though Tom Pelfrey's just dying there basically, but gives a really powerful performance, just like seeing him, looking at the sun coming through the trees, and what that kind of symbolizes in some of his flashbacks. And that was like, and of course, Mark Ruffalo, just accepting that he's dying there in his arms. But that was really powerful. But the scenes here with Grasso really good as well. Did you have any other shout outs specifically?
I think when we look at the episode as a whole, I would pick Tom, Mark Ruffalo, partly because of a scene we haven't talked about yet, which is the one in his own house with Sam.
Oh yes, what a great scene.
Or
Yeah.
a sequence of scenes, really,
Yeah.
when he's talking with his daughters and then when he's talking with Sam.
Yeah, you know what? We could transition to what's happening outside of the main storyline, because another character, another actress I want to call out here is the actress who plays Maeve here, because I thought Maeve in that scene where she's confessing to Tom. I said this to my wife when we were watching it, but it's like the dialogue that she delivers is totally boilerplate. It's just
Yes.
like
Mhm.
I thought I was doing the right thing. I'm sorry, like really basic stuff.
Yeah.
But what's happening in her performance, there is so much going on. You can feel all
Yeah.
of like her conflict. She's got the pain of losing Robbie, the weight of now
Yeah.
having these take care of these kids, the mistakes she made up until this point. She like the weight of I could have just said something that night and maybe I could have saved Robbie's life. He would have been arrested,
Mhm,
but maybe I would have
mhm.
saved his life. And all of that is in her performance. I thought like that scene made me well up, and her dialogue is completely boilerplate. So
No,
I
I agree. She is great here. And the whole character that they've created for her is so interesting, that she's only 21 years old and she's dealing with so much that has happened to her just in the last year or so.
right ever since her dad's death, right? Like
Yeah.
all the additional drama that she's had to deal with. But yeah, what an incredible performance. I do hope she gets some kind of it's not a flashy performance. So I do really think like I do hope she gets like a award nomination consideration later on, because these type of roles that I prefer, honestly, these kind of very emotionally true but naturalistic performances, usually people want to be like, screaming or throwing things at each other, or walking with a limp or something. That's the type of thing
Mhm,
that gets a lot of
mhm.
attention. This type of like just very honest, like lived in performance usually isn't rewarded, but I really do hope they remember her at awards time. And she might have a very big episode next week, by the way. Maybe she'll like be holed up in the house like straw dogs type, just shooting out everybody who as they arrive, a home invasion type. I don't think that's the way this show's
Next
going to go.
week, Maeve finally snaps.
Exactly. Her and Tom are inside the house, and it's like straight up straw dogs killing everybody who tries to bust in, and kills the entire gang in one night. That's not the ending we're going to get, people, just to be clear. Oh, and of course, yes. So I wanted to touch on that but of course, Tom with Sam. Tell me about all of these scenes, right? First, like I wanted to kind of clarify what I said earlier.
Yeah.
When he shows up at
Yeah.
this, like um, not a halfway house. What do you call this? Like a reformatory? What would be
I mean, he calls it juvenile
a
hall.
juvenile hall, right?
Yeah.
So he's showing up at this like kind of juvenile detention center, and I'm like, oh, is he finally going to visit
Right.
Ethan? And no, so he takes a step in that direction, but he's not going to visit Ethan. He actually goes to visit Sam, and poor Sam is basically incarcerated at this point.
Oh, this poor sweet child. Oh,
And then what a great scene. First of all, just how sweet are these two together? This kid
really?
just seems to bring out all the sweetness in all these other performers as well. One incredible performance, by the way, for this kid too. I mean, you could basically say, well, maybe he's just being himself, but I mean, that's not how it is. You got cameras in your face. So the fact
No,
that this
he's
kid,
amazing.
he has this real earnest, you believe that this is his true character.
Earnest is the exact word that was coming to my mind too, partly because my child at a younger age was very earnest, and I always found it so
So endearing,
endearing.
right?
Like it would just pull at my heart how earnest, like he just wants to see his chicken and
Yep. And
ah,
credit to the people who make this show as well. I mean, working with children, they're obviously not so precocious. Very rarely is there an actor that's so precocious that they're, making the performance whole cloth. The filmmakers and the cast have to make this kid feel natural on set so that can come through. So very impressive to pull
Yeah,
off this performance from this
I
kid,
agree.
just to be clear. And but anyway, all these scenes with Mark Ruffalo here, really beautiful. And then, of course, what he does, which is bring the kid home with him. And the
Well,
daughter's reactions to this are so funny.
first of all, there was a minute that I worried somehow, or not worried, it wouldn't be the worst outcome, but I thought somehow he was going to end up back with Maeve. And I thought, oh my God, this poor 21-year-old girl is going to have another child to take care of. So in that way, I was kind of like, okay, this is actually makes more sense. But yes, he's still a foster parent, so
Yep.
here he is.
My wife actually called that out immediately, going like, they're just going to let him go home with him. And then, he does explain it, that he's like, hey, he's still a foster parent. And yeah, if you are eligible to be a foster parent, you can actually, foster a child if you need to. I was trying to think of an example of that where someone was a foster parent or was eligible to be a foster parent, and then they had adopted someone, like exactly like in the 11th hour, like it was some kind of uh, natural disaster. It was a story that I heard on a podcast or something. There was a natural disaster, and literally, like the neighbors were fosters, and some of the the parent died, and then they just adopted their neighbors' kids, like because if they're in the system, it's like, well, we'll adopt them, and it's pretty much what's happening in this particular case here as well. Yeah, and he makes a good point. He's like, this is what your mom would have wanted as well if she'd seen him. So it is. I was actually really touched by this, because you think about how he has obviously regrets about how everything happened last time, but he's just gotta do what he's got to do and adopt this kid again. So hopefully things don't go as badly as last time.
Oh my gosh, yeah, fingers crossed.
We'll
I
be seeing 10
also
years how it all turns out.
I also love the scenes between the sisters that led
Yes.
up to this and here, where you see how they really have bonded and have an understanding of each other. I thought it was really, really sweet.
This is really good filmmaking, by the way, in that particular case, that the show has very much put them on opposite sides, as is the case with family, right? You, especially with adoptive family, you would just presume that they're like on opposite sides of this particular divide. And there's a real coldness where Sarah is just being, cordial to her. You can hold the baby if you sit down, but it's just there's this tension there. And then, like you mentioned, in this particular episode, seeing that sisterly bond where she talks about how the husband's moved out because of the cheating, and then she just like touches her arm, like to give her a little support in that moment. And then how they kind of roll their eyes at each other, going like, what the hell's going on now, when Sam shows up. So there's like all of a sudden this common ground again. So, as is often the case with family, which I thought was really, really well done and subtle. I mean, I really like the fact that none of this is hitting you over the head with it. It's all, the dynamic is like ingrained in the dynamic, the performances and in the character itself.
Yeah, I thought all of it was really believable and really well done.
Yeah, and then we get to the end of the episode. We see that Sally, I believe her name is Sally, Sting's offspring here, the Ray's girlfriend, wife, etc. In this particular, she shows up with the money or half the money or whatever it is. She goes, Robbie told me to give this to you, and I'm not sure I would trust this lady with $1 million or whatever it was.
Yeah,
even if he's like, you could keep half of it and give half of it back to the family. I mean, like, if Robbie's not around, she doesn't have to comply with that. So maybe, she's just a good person and Robbie saw that in her as well. But I don't know. This is not the person I'm going to trust with this. I would put that like in a UPS box and have it delivered in, a week or something. That's what I would trust. But indeed, the money ends up in the house, and we have this kind of like victorious moment at the final moments of Robbie in the water again. Like, his plan worked. I'm like, well, for the moment, because Jason is headed to this very house, I'm pretty sure.
He knows he's only got magazines now, and yeah.
Exactly. And of course, there's still going to be the fallout between. Yeah, let's talk about them for a bit. So you have Jason and Perry, who is in communication with their gang as well. Jason's very concerned that Erin's missing. Of course, that's creating tension with Perry, who knows what's going on, who killed her inadvertently. I heard a theory, by the way, that, as if this was a fact, and you tell me what you think about this, the indication here was that Perry when he made that offer to protect Aaron, and if this is true, they should have seeded it better, that he had something for Aaron, so that potentially he was in love with her, let's say, and that he was like thinking of this as a way to, he's like, well, I'll protect you and take care of you in that way and get you out of the situation. But if that's the case, then I mean, I haven't seen that, but apparently that is like a theory that's going around. I'm like, I don't
Huh.
see how there's any proof that he was in love with her. So
I don't see that either. And I am still not 100% convinced that that was a real offer.
right,
I
that you
know
think he was
he,
just
I
setting her
know
up. Yeah,
right before he kills her, he says we could have done it this way, but
right.
I think that still didn't make it clear to me that that's something that he really could have and would have made happen for her.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I find it, if that's the case, I don't think the show has done a good enough job of seeding
I
that.
totally agree with you.
But of course, we know inevitably there's going to be some fallout between the two of these. And Jason, yeah, is this actor. I mean, of all the performances, not my favorite performance on the show, to be honest. He's more effective in certain moments than he is. I mean, I think he's effective at being physical, which I think is part of the role. And then maybe this is just the way the character is written. You see him again have like that softness to his face where he's worried about Erin. He's like, where is she? She would never leave her kids behind. But we only see the flashes of this. I think his character, in general, the performance is a little one note. He's just kind of villainous. And I don't think they balance that in humanizing him enough if they want us to care about him at all. But yeah, I think inevitably there's going to be some fallout from this, no doubt. And I guess one other thing to bring up is just that I didn't touch on earlier was there is Grasso, who's of course struggling with this. I do like very much when he has those final moments with Tom. He says, "I'm coming for you." What does he actually say? He says, "Then come," or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean is tough talk, but of course we know that that is not
Mm-hmm.
actually what he's feeling right there. What did you think about that confrontation with is that his captain who comes to visit him?
Yeah, I was unclear on whether we had seen that guy before and whether I was supposed to know who he was.
I literally, I mean, I have not had time to go and rewatch it, but I'm like, I now in my head, incepting this possibly incorrectly. But when Tom shows up and he goes, "Here's my captain," and they shake hands, like for a moment during that briefing last week, I'm like, or 2 weeks ago, I guess it was when they were staking out the park. I'm like, maybe in that moment, the actor was already there, but I'm like, I don't know. Like he did not make an impression if that was the case. So
Exactly.
not enough to stand out to be like, oh yeah, here he is again. Right. So I'm just like, is this a different guy? Is this the same guy? Is this actually the captain? I mean, by the way, a lot of the cover up and not understanding his background might make a little more sense if this is indeed his captain, right? Because you can imagine then this is all kind of set up by a higher up. But yeah, if not, then it's a little confusing. But what do you think about the dynamic between the two of them there? I'm very curious to know, like, how did he? At first, I'm like, is this just him working on his own, Grasso, that is, because maybe he has some kind of connection to this gang from his past or something, or maybe they grew up together or something. And I'm like, is that what we're supposed to believe here? But now like the captain's in on it as well. So this is,
Right. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I need all this additional detail because now I have additional questions that the show has to answer and may not answer, by the way. So that's just one more hanging thread potentially.
Maybe setting up a way that we can have some sympathy for Grasso, that he felt like he had no choice but to do this informant stuff. I don't know.
I do hope we see that in the finale, that, whatever happens to Grasso, that we do get to understand his choices a little bit more, not just that whatever his captain saw him as morally compromised. And, I'd like to see a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on with him. So that pretty much covers the plot of the show, but there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of circle back to. One of them is like, do you have, now that we've talked that out a little bit, do you have any understanding of like, what was Robbie's actual plan? Do you have any theories on this?
In what regard? With the drugs and
Yeah.
the
So, okay.
woods?
So he goes to see Freddie. At some point, there's a deal. Either he sells the drugs to him there or he has Sally come and sell it and hold the money. I'm not sure exactly what those details are, but he brokers some kind of understanding with them. So the drugs have already been sold. He shows up there with the bag. He yells at Tom at one point, "You're ruining the plan." The plan is to performatively throw the drugs away so that Gang thinks it's lost. But then how is he going to escape at that moment?
I don't know. And why do you need to do this in the woods?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why couldn't he? Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I don't understand.
I mean, not even the woods like around the corner, the woods, an hour away or wherever they were.
Yeah, and you know that in that circumstance, he would have been like, so let's say things went to
I mean, I
plan.
know there's a cabin there, but still.
Yeah, his family cabin, I think, or his brothers, one or the other. Yeah, so let's think about that. So the cops are obviously not a factor in the finale. He's not factoring them in. It's just him going to Freddie and making allowing Freddie to rat him out to the Dark Hearts that the deal is going to happen in the cabin. But of course, that's all a ruse because Freddie's already given him the money for the drugs. So he would be staking out the cabin. Would he try to kill some of them when they arrived, and then he would throw the bag away and still get away? But was the plan he'd kill them all, and if he doesn't kill them all, he would throw away the empty bag to convince them the drugs were lost? What is this plan?
I don't know. I mean, we know he doesn't have good judgment, but I feel like anybody would know that he's not going to be able to kill them all, assuming
Right.
anyone in addition to Jason and Perry show up.
Yeah, he doesn't know when he starts this plan. He does not know if Cliff is alive or dead. But even with Cliff, like, how is that? He's going to kill. I mean, it's not like the gang's going to show up alone. They're going to show up with muscle, obviously.
That's what I'm saying.
Who does
Yeah.
he have? He has nobody. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It would have made, I mean, he's not that clever, as we've known before, but it would be more interesting in a way to bring the cops in on it, in a way, to have them arrive to capture him and find the gang there. And then, I mean, I guess the risk there, theoretically, is that then you might end up getting like more innocent people killed, even more so than they are now. And then the other option is that he lets himself get killed, but then he has this fake bag of drugs, which of course he needs to see somebody. Someone needs to see him dispose of this bag, right? So they can't just kill him, and then he'll be like, "I'll never tell you where the money is or where the drugs are," because then they're just going to go to his house and look for them, right? So I don't know. I don't think once again, maybe it's totally in character, and this is not a plot hole at all. Maybe he is like thinking like this is his teenage version of himself still, in fantasy land, thinking that this is all going to work out the way he thinks.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's hard to tell how his brain works.
Oh, importantly, oh man, I almost forgot to bring this up. Good thing I wrote it down. I'm checking my notes. Another thing I want to call out that just a little subtle detail, but did make me get a little emotional there for a moment, was when Aaliyah's cleaning out her room and she finds the bullseye
Yes, the
patch.
patch.
So heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean, that was more, this is like kind of filmmaking I prefer. That was more emotionally powerful than her dying in Grasso's arms, to be honest.
She really cranked out that patch fast.
She really did. She's very good at that. I mean, she was hooking up with Grasso like a day ago. She somehow crammed that all in there. Maybe while she was, in her room right next door in the actual, task, headquarters, this like cabin in the woods. That's what she was doing the whole time.
Maybe so.
She had her patching kit with her. All right. Any predictions for next week? What do you think the likelihood of some of these? Because I know you don't like making predictions. Tom goes and visits Ethan in the prison. That's definitely going to happen.
Very
right?
likely. Yes.
Grasso will take down all the Dark Hearts. Do you think that's going to happen? I mean, physically with a gun.
No, I don't.
Grasso is going to turn himself in and then confess. And
50-50.
yeah, that's the one I have question marks about, like how the Grasso storyline is going to play out. I hope he doesn't it would be terrible in general to see anybody kill themselves on this show, but I do hope that that's not the route he goes, because I'd like to see him, do his penance, even if that means going to jail, but also taking down like these corrupt cops who potentially are involved with this gang as well. The Jason and Perry are going to show up at Maeve's house. What is the likelihood of that?
Pretty likely.
Yeah, same. I think it's nearly a 100% certainty.
Yeah, in fact, I agree almost 100%. I just, in my heart, I'm hoping that Maeve and the kids are not there.
Are out. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I just thought of this. What do you think? Do you think there's any chance that the chief would get rid of Grasso? Maybe the chief goes, his chief, the corrupt chief, goes after
Hmm.
Grasso. That'd be too suspicious, right? So I'm just trying to
Seems
think
like
like if the chief goes and wants to, if he sees that Grasso's having a crisis of conscience, that he is going to rub him out. But he'd have to orchestrate some way to get rid of him because if he just turns up dead, that's going to be very suspicious, I think.
right. He knows that they're under a microscope right now.
Right, exactly, exactly. If Maeve runs off, where do you think she's headed to? I mean, she can't run off because they just let her off on this like slap on the wrist, basically. But she has to know that if she just disappears overnight, they very well could arrest her for what she's
Well,
done, right?
also, I don't know if Maeve appreciates the amount of danger she's in.
Right. That's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
Like this money showed up, but I don't know if she fully comprehends how and why.
Oh, I think she knows where the money's coming from.
You
You know,
do.
and and yeah, I think she knows. I think she knows that like someone's going to come for this money, and she's going to be, you know, she's
Well,
worried
she's
about that.
very street smart in a way that Robbie never was.
I'm sure she'll hide the money because yes, I mean she's definitely smarter than Robbie, but she'll definitely hide the money. But then maybe I guess she could give it if she gives it back. Maybe she then thinks that she can because she's not only just trying to preserve the money, she's trying to protect those kids, obviously, right? So, and that
Yeah.
could be like even if she's just injured, you know, even if they take her off the map, it's not like the kids get to spend that money if she's hidden it away somewhere and they're probably going to end up in foster care or whatever. So she has to think about protecting those kids. So she may very well give the money back. That would be a very weird twist.
Hmm.
Although I don't think, I mean, even if that happens temporarily, I mean, I think that, do you think Jason's going to die? I think, well, first of all, either Jason or Perry, the whole setup with Aaron, one of them is going to die. That's for sure. Or
Hmm.
both potentially. But if you had to bet, is Perry going to get the upper hand on Jason, or is Jason going to flip out when he finds out about Aaron and kill Perry? Is Perry going to proactively kill Jason, knowing that that's the case? What do you think?
I feel like if somebody's going to survive, it's going to be Perry. He seems more of a survivor to me than Jason.
And by the way, Perry also knows that they want to kill Jason. Like the plan was to kill
True.
Jason, like on Saturday, right? They're going to invite
So,
him somewhere and rub him out. So if
yeah.
he wants to get rid of Jason to protect himself, he just needs to like just sit back and let it all
Yeah.
play out, right? So
Serve him up on a silver platter. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And I mean, Jason might be. I do wonder if Jason, going back to like the plot hole of like the way the shootout plays out at the beginning of the episode, I do wonder if Perry is. I'm not Perry. I mean, Jason is aware to some extent that his neck is on the line, and that he does need to. Like that's maybe why he's so desperate to get his hands on the drugs. So maybe he's a little more aware that if they invite him out to, you know, the same place where he beat Billy to death, that it's like, I don't know if I'm going. I'm staying right here. Thank you very much. So yeah, I don't know if you've done this in your head, but have you compared this at all to Mare of Easttown? The only reason I bring it up is because obviously they're very different shows, but Mare of Easttown
Very.
also had this kind of like the dramatically kind of the story peaked. I don't want to spoil things for anybody who hasn't seen Mare of Easttown. You should definitely watch it, by the way, if you haven't. But that there is kind of like the show doesn't kind of like culminate where you expect it to, let's say. I think like kind of most
Yeah.
people who remember like the most shocking thing that happens in that show. And honestly, it's a little bit of a critique I have of Mare of Easttown that I mean, I thought that that development was truly shocking, but it was also kind of like the show was kind of a little unfocused in returning to the mystery only after having this whole digression with this, you know, serial killer and stuff. It was a little odd. But anyway, how does this match up to that if you have compared them at all?
I haven't purposefully compared them, although I can see why I would. I think Mare of Easttown, it's interesting. I was going to say it did a better job of exploring kind of like the emotional aspects of the family dynamics, but I don't think that's fair. I think Task is doing that as well.
Right. It
But
was
for
a little more
some
mundane, right? I mean, you talk about like a dysfunctional family in a much more regular way where
Yeah.
your mom's moved in with you, you're all under the same roof because of your divorce. Your daughter's, a teenager now and going through her own growing pains. Like that was much more of a mundane type of
But the
drama.
son had taken his own life,
Yes,
right?
that's
So there
true.
was
That
that.
kind of hung over. Yes, that's a good
Yeah.
point. That hang over the whole entire show for sure.
So I don't know, for some reason, and even though I do enjoy it here and like it here, I found it better in Mare of Easttown, that exploration.
I think that the focus of Mare of Easttown is very much on that family unit, those women
Uh-huh.
living
Uh-huh.
together. I think that's another thing that you might appreciate, and I don't want to gender it completely, but very much that show, even though it's written by a man, is very much about the dynamic of those
Yeah.
women across three
Yeah.
generations. And this is very much about masculinity to a large extent, right?
Yeah.
This
I get
show
what
is
you're saying.
about
Yeah.
men being like different versions of men. Like, am I supposed to be a provider? Am I supposed to be, masculine and intimidating and tough and, punch people and shoot them and stab them? Or am I supposed to be forgiving and like bigger than all this? The protecting father who's a nurturer rather than a, physically imposing. And like that's the dynamics of this whole entire show, which is not necessarily thematically what the interest is in Mare of Easttown for sure.
Yeah. I think that's a good point.
So it is interesting. They're like very different explorations of being a police officer. I mean, that they have that in common. Obviously, these detectives that are very flawed people, and then they have these dealing with these crimes and how it intersects with their own traumas. But I think their concerns are very different, right? Like Robbie and Tom, as these kind of spiritual pairs, are two very different types of men, although they probably internally are. These are like going back to the poem. These are their souls are the same, but
Mm.
externally and in their actions very different, even if their goals perhaps are the same. All right, Sona, one more episode. Exciting.
All right. I'm ready.
All right.
Okay. I'll talk to
Thanks
you soon.
again. Bye.
Okay. Bye.